I think the American people are getting awfully tired about Republican hypocrisy regarding the deficit. Let's take a short look back on American history. In January 2001, when Bill Clinton left office as president, this country was running a $236 billion surplus. That is a lot of money. George W. Bush came into office as a great deficit hawk. And under Bush and his deficit hawk friends, we went into war in Afghanistan and Iraq. And we forgot to pay for those wars. Can you imagine that? The great deficit hawks who were so worried about running up this huge credit card, they forgot to pay for 2 wars, which, by the time we take care of the last veteran, is going to end up costing us somewhere around $3 trillion. Second of all, for the first time in American history, while we're in 2 wars, they also decided to give more tax breaks to the wealthiest people in this country. And by giving huge tax breaks to the wealthiest 2%, that's going to cost another $1 trillion over a 10-year period. And oh, by the way, they passed a Medicare Part D prescription drug program to help them out in an election and forgot to pay for that as well. That was when George W. Bush was president. And by the way, Paul Ryan, the leader of the deficit hawks, I know you'll all be surprised to know this, he voted for all of that stuff. Now Barack Obama becomes president. And all of these born-again deficit hawks, they just stay up nights worrying about our deficit. And they have concluded that the best way to do deficit reduction is to cut Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, education, and other programs desperately needed by working families in this country. Well, what's the problem? You got a couple of problems. Number one, at a time when this country has the most unequal distribution of wealth and income of any major country on earth, richest people becoming much richer, middle class disappearing, poverty increasing, it is, in my mind, immoral to move toward deficit reduction on the backs of the elderly, the children, the sick, and the lowest income people in this country, people who are already hurting. And second of all, as it happens, it's bad economic policy. Now, what about deficit reduction and cutting Social Security? Well, you know what? You got a little bit of a problem there, because Social Security, which is independently funded by the payroll tax, has a $2.7 trillion surplus, can pay out every benefit owed to every eligible American for the next 21 years. Social Security hasn't contributed 1 nickel to the deficit. So cutting Social Security is just an old-fashioned Republican idea because they don't like Social Security today and never have. In terms of cutting Medicare, in terms of cutting Medicaid, in terms of cutting education, cause devastating problems to middle-income and lower-income Americans. It is a very bad idea. Somehow or another, our great deficit hawk friends, Paul Ryan and Mitt Romney and all the rest, haven't quite thought about the possibility of asking the wealthiest people in this country, who are doing phenomenally well, whose effective tax rate is the lowest in decades, to maybe pay a little bit more in taxes. Well, I don't think the Koch brothers think that's a good idea. I don't think Sheldon Adelson thinks it's a good idea. I don't think other millionaires and billionaires who support the Republicans think that's a great idea. So I guess that will not be on the Republican agenda. What about doing away with some of these massive loopholes that large corporations enjoy? 1 out of 4 major corporations in this country doesn't pay any taxes at all. We're losing $100 billion a year because the wealthy and large corporations are stashing their money in the Cayman Islands to avoid taxes. What about addressing that issue? Guess we can't do that as well. What about a hard look at military spending? We're now spending 3 times what we spent in 1997 on defense. We're spending as much as the rest of the world combined. Can we take a hard look at defense spending? Well, not really. According to the Republicans, in fact, they want to increase defense spending. So the moment that we're in is our Republican friends working day and night for the wealthiest people in this country want to balance the budget on people who, as a result of this terrible Wall Street caused recession, are already hurting. and they want to protect the wealthiest people and the largest corporations who today are doing extremely well. That is an issue. This is a fight that we have got to engage in. It is a moral issue, it is an economic issue, and we cannot allow them to balance the budget on those people who are already hurting.